Hello, everybody. Today we are covering poems from the Harlem Renaissance. And I thought I would just talk briefly about the poem Harlem by Langston Hughes, written in 1751. And just kind of walk through with you how I read this poem, how I scan it. To start off, I'm gonna read the poem, and then I'll show you my scansion of it and talk a little bit about how I use that scansion to support what I think the theme is of the poem. Remember, we've been talking about the relationship between form and content. So here's the poem, Harlem by Langston Hughes, 1951. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? A couple of things to note about this poem before I show you my scansion. This was written in 1951, a good 3 decades after the height of the Harlem Renaissance, which, as you learned from the short video clip that you watched, was really going on in the 1920s. And the 1920s is when Hughes was a young man, going to college, part of this thriving explosion of Black musical expression, poetry, and literature. And there was so much hope for a better future for the people of Harlem, for Black Americans. And Hughes was part of this movement. Over time, right, not much changed, unfortunately, for Black Americans and for Black people living in Harlem. So Hughes is growing up, going through life, becoming a middle-aged man, and this poem is a manifestation of his frustration, right? Of his being told, just wait, just be patient, things will change. And this poem, I think, reveals what could happen, or what might happen, or what's building up among Black inhabitants in Harlem and in other predominantly Black cities and areas. So to start, I want to say this is how I scan it. So again, the bolded and underlined syllables are where the stresses are. So what happens to a dream deferred? You can see where the stresses are there. And when we get to that second stanza, so we have the question, and we get to that first full stanza, does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? And we pause there, right? Notice how between up and like there is no pause. That is what we would call enjambment, right? Where you spill over from one line to the next. But of course, the question mark after sun causes us to pause. And then we go on to the next question, or fester like a sore and then run. Again, enjambment, or spilling over from one line to the next. And this is, again, the dream that's been deferred, the dream of Black equality, right, that has been deferred for so long, that Hughes has witnessed in his own life. And he's coming up with these similes to imagine, these metaphors to imagine what is that dream deferred like? Is it like a raisin in the sun? Is it like a sore that festers and runs? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? So again, we note the mirror, reflection in that stanza, right? We have these questions that are followed by a hyphen and enjambment over to the simile. So in the first and the third line, it's or fester like a sore and then run. And in that and those very last two lines of the stanza, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet. And then we move on to the next very short stanza. Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. And then the very ending, or does it explode? Those are all stressed. That's a series of spondies, right? We talked about the different metrical feet. Those are all stressed syllables. You cannot say that line without having the pressing desire and anger and frustration that gets channeled through those through the announcement of those words. Or does it explode, right? That is the open question that we're left with. What happens to a dream deferred? Is it going to sag? Is it going to rot? Is it going to explode? And that is ultimately the question that Hughes leaves us with. What is the future for Black liberation? So that's just, so again, I would say that the poem's thematic message is that the constant deferring of the American dream for Black Americans will only fester and rot and potentially lead to revolution. And we get that through Hughes's very careful use of enjambment and meter, particularly in that last line, or does it explode, right? So that's what I have for today. I'm going to ask you to do something similar with our other two poems that are available. Please look to the D2L post, respond to a classmate as well. And I will see you next week on Tuesday. Take care, be safe. Bye.